our accounting 2 class, we had a field trip to an accounting firm, and we walked up to this building, and it was just a floor of cubicles, and everyone had a white shirt on. Some had ties, some didn't. It was just death to me. Like I was like, at first I would always want to be an accountant. I loved numbers, loved finding and dealing with the problems with accounting. And then we got a chance to talk to some of these accountants and ask them questions, and none of their answers were attractive to me. Got home from the field trip, went to lacrosse practice, and my coach was like, hey, how was that field trip? Or how was your day? And I was like, I went on this field trip. He said, how was it? I was like, it's terrible. Went to the worst place on earth. And he was like, well, if that doesn't really suit you, why don't you come down to the middle school next week? Because he was the middle school PE teacher. He's like, check it out. He's like, I think you'd be good at it.
Welcome to the Superintendent's Hangout, where we discuss topics in education, charter schools, life in general, and not necessarily in that order. I'm your host, Dr. Sharetta. Come on in and hang out. In this episode, I sat down with Matt Vozzolo. Matt is a middle school PE teacher, lacrosse coach, fan of the Movember facial hair, which he talks about being part of the Movember charity event that raises money on behalf of men's health, both prostate health as well as mental health awareness. Matt and I cover a wide range of topics, from his views on physical education as part of a balanced approach to health and nutrition and activity in children's lives, his views on his emerging leadership roles. He is the co-coordinator of an extended learning opportunities program that he talks about in more depth in this episode, and much more. I hope you enjoy listening to this episode as much as I did sitting down with Matt Vozzolo. Welcome, Matt. Thank you so much for coming and hanging out with us for a little bit today.
Thank you for having me.
I was wondering if you could start today's conversation with a little history lesson, your origin story, where you come from, what your background was like, what brings you to the present moment.
Okay. I grew up on the East Coast in Connecticut, in a log cabin my father had built with his friends. I'm the youngest of 4 boys.
Like Laura Ingalls Wilder style, huh?
Yeah. My parents were interesting hippies. You would never be able to tell by looking at them, but my dad was more of the civil rights, protest the Vietnam War type. My mother was more of the health food, no medicine from the pharmacies, things like that, hippie. So, we had an interesting childhood with the 4 boys, going off in the woods, getting into trouble. We had ducks, chickens, rabbits, cats. I had a neighbor with 2 giant pigs and a Rottweiler, and got into all sorts of trouble over there. Spent my entire childhood in Connecticut in one of 2 towns. Went to a small high school, which is on the same campus as our middle and elementary school, Summers High School. It's the largest graduating class ever of 140 people. Then I went to college in New Hampshire. I got a job right out of college teaching PE. Lived there for about 5 years, and was just kind of outgrew that area, itching to move on, and came to San Diego on a vacation for a week. And during that vacation, got a job interview, and then got a call back, and then moved out here 7 weeks later, and eventually got over to Einstein, and now I find myself on a podcast.
There you go. That's a lightning tour in 2 minutes.
There you go.
I'm curious about your upbringing, especially because sounded like it was pretty atypical. Do you carry some of those lessons forward, like kind of unconventional thinking? I mean, I'm asking from a totally selfish standpoint, because I was raised in a very, I have to be careful because I think my mom's going to listen to this episode, but let's just call it an atypical, unconventional setting. And what struck me was when you said your mom didn't believe in medicine from the pharmacy. I suffered from migraines as a kid, and for years I thought the only remedy for migraines was like ice on your head, and I think we put heat on my feet, ice on my head, and strong coffee with lemon juice in it or something. And it was like, until I discovered that they made Tylenol, and then it was off to the races.
Yeah, it was similar to that. You go to the dentist. There's no fluoride. You're not allowed to have
but
that.
did you have Novocaine?
No.
You didn't do Novocaine
So,
either.
if we
at
had
the dentist, like a drilling cavity.
Yeah, I believe we had.
Oh, see, I didn't have
local.
Novocaine either. I didn't even know that was a thing.
Yeah.
So I can one up
Okay.
you in the suffering
Well,
department.
there you go. But,
Sorry, Mom.
Yeah. So yeah, it was interesting. We had a lot of different remedies for things, but it was nice. We had multiple gardens. We had a corn garden, a tomato garden, and just a regular vegetable garden. It was real fun towards the end of fall when you get to break everything down and reintroduce it to the earth, which with 4 boys means you go out and have like a tomato and corn fight.
Right.
And the only pills or anything we were allowed to take was we took algae pills every morning. And then when the bottle was finished, we filled it up with water and rinsed it out and poured that into the cat's bowl. And our cat drank the algae residue of that. I have no idea.
Algae?
Algae.
Like
They were little green pills, yeah. Compressed little green algae.
Did the cat live a long time?
Yeah, it was a Maine Coon cat, so she was going to live forever anyways. I think she got to 18. But I want to say about a year or two ago, someone sent me a study that algae had some negative impact with memory and Alzheimer's or something.
But now
you
can't remember the study.
Yeah. There you go. So yeah.
Yeah, I think one of the gifts of I had an upbringing where I was spent a lot of time in nature as well, and there are real gifts in that we take for granted. That a lot of our students now in urban areas don't have that exposure to nature.
Absolutely.
There's some real, even the rhythms of the seasons, even without the tomato fights, just to know when fall's coming and what that means in the earth. And I think a lot of kids, the only way they know fall's coming is it's getting a little cooler, and Target is now selling Halloween, like these like plastic Halloween ghost things, and
yeah, it was nice to be able to be outside whenever we wanted and to have the clothing necessary to go outside whenever we wanted. We chopped our own wood. We heated our home with a wood fireplace, so we had to you get the cord of wood delivered, you rotate it to last year's stack, you move that one there, you have the one that goes inside, you have to chop the kindling.
Yep.
And my father and my second oldest brother still heat their homes with their wood stoves.
Wow. I didn't know we had this many parallels. We did as a kid too, and I think it's why I have arthritis in my hands now. No, maybe not. Yeah. But it's hard work, right?
Absolutely.
But good hard work.
Yeah, basic human need, and you're working to that. And I'm grateful for that. It's definitely allowed me to be able to put my head down and just bury through any mental or physical hard work that needs to happen.
So you go to college, and then you decide you want to be a PE teacher. Why that choice, or did the job choose you?
That was before college. I decided to be a PE teacher.
Really? Tell us about that.
In high school, I was mainly focused in business classes, where the majority of my brothers were in wood shop, tech, auto mechanics, things like that. I was taking entrepreneurship, accounting, and in our accounting 2 class, we had a field trip to an accounting firm in West Hartford, which might be the most boring place on earth. And we walked up this building, and it was just a floor of cubicles, and everyone had a white shirt on. Some had ties, some didn't, and it was just death to me. Like I was like, at first I would always want to be an accountant. I loved numbers, loved finding and dealing with the problems with accounting. And then we got a chance to talk to some of these accountants and ask them questions, and none of their questions were none of their answers, were attractive to me. And got home from the field trip, went to lacrosse practice, and my coach was like, "Hey, how was that field trip? Or how was your day?" And I was like, "I went on this field trip." He said, "How was it?" I was like, "It's terrible. Went to the worst place on earth." And he was like, "Well, if that doesn't really suit you, why don't you come down to the middle school next week?" Because he was the middle school PE teacher. And he's like, "Check it out." He's like, "I think you'd be good at it." And so got the permission, went down the next week, And with our schools being on the same campus, you leave school and you walk down this little road and you go to the next one. And I played wiffle ball all day long. And he had a little Palm Pilot. And he was like, I don't even have a computer. I do all my grades on the fly on a Palm Pilot.
And that was cutting edge, right?
Yeah,
there.
this is 2004.
Oh, that's cutting edge,
yeah.
man.
And so ever since then, I was just dead set on that. Applied to schools with only PE programs. And then eventually decided on New England College because that's where my grandfather graduated from.
And you played sports in high school.
I played ice hockey and lacrosse.
And I know you've continued lacrosse now as an adult.
Yes.
What draws you to that sport? It's not so common on the West Coast, although I think there are pockets of like private school teams and stuff. But
just the history and tradition of the sport, being a Native American sport, and just the culture that comes from that, and coming from an area where there's a lot of Native American culture around lacrosse, always drove me to it. And it's very similar to ice hockey. It's essentially just ice hockey in the air. And I started skating when I was 3, joined my first team at 5 for hockey, and then just transitioned eventually into lacrosse. It's rewarding and difficult. It's physical. There's a strong sense of ownership and belief when you do something right in it. It's fun. I love it. But I'm biased, like I said.
Didn't the original teams used to play across like miles and miles of just open land?
Miles and miles of forest, open land, whatever was between the two tribes. They would maybe settle disputes, have little bets, practice for war, whatever it was. And they would have ceremonies the night before the game to decide on how many goals for the winner. And it was essentially like 2 main rules. You can't use your hand to touch the ball, and you can't injure your opponent to the point where they can't continue to play.
That's a slippery slope.
Yeah. And, it transitioned. I hope I'm getting this right. I think in the 1800s, where English and French settlers decided to make more concrete rules, ways to sell tickets, make money. And it evolved over years and years and years. Canadians developed box lacrosse for their hockey players to stay in shape in the off season.
Like on a rink, right? A dry rink.
Yep. Yeah. So when the ice goes out in the summer, you have the concrete left, and it's a great way for arenas to continue to make money and the players to continue to stay in shape. And that's the form of lacrosse that I continue to play now. My friends and I had started a team here called the the San Diego Whalers.
Freudian
the
slip.
San Diego Whalers, to honor the Hartford Whalers.
Mm. Why do you think lacrosse hasn't caught on a higher level, professionally? I know they're professional teams, and prior to the interview we were talking about that, but it's certainly not on the level of some of your other football, basketball, baseball, soccer.
Yeah, I would say just how long it's been around professionally, and also the universities and colleges on the East Coast, especially the Northeast, their main, usually male sport is lacrosse. There are some of the larger ones that do have football, like Syracuse, Virginia, Duke, but those are also lacrosse powerhouses. Out here on the West Coast, you have these amazingly large schools with these very successful, very large football teams, and they are giving their scholarships to the football teams because that's where the money is.
That's right.
So there's discrepancy there, so they fill in with women's lacrosse usually. So a lot of these huge football schools have amazing women's lacrosse programs. And then, as a youth player in San Diego, there's a lot of opportunities to play lacrosse. There's plenty of clubs all around. But once you get past high school, if you're not going to go D1, it's difficult to go across the country to go play D3 lacrosse unless you're coming from a well-off affluent family, because you're not going to get any scholarship or get any help. And then you're dealing with the idea of being 3,000 miles away from one of the greatest places on earth to go freeze for the fall, winter, and most of the spring.
Right.
And that's just a hard thing for a lot of people to do. It takes a unique and special individual to be able to pull that off. So I think that has a little bit to do with it. But it's getting more popular. There's 2 professional leagues in the United States for lacrosse, the PLL and the NLL. San Diego has their own team in the NLL. It's box lacrosse, the San Diego Seals. We've taken a couple of our students to some of the games.
I think you've brought some players to speak to your PE students as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we've had a couple of their big name players in here. Austin Stotts. We had Cam Holding, Berg. Let's see. Before he retired, the great Brody Merrill. So there's some in the lacrosse world. Those are some pretty big names.
Is there an international competition for lacrosse similar to a World Cup?
Yeah, there's the World Games. They were actually in San Diego last summer. The United States and Canada has played in every gold medal game for that. And I believe once the Haudenosaunee, which is the native team that's allowed to play, they've been a consistent bronze medal winner. But they're being played in the Olympics coming up in 2028 as well.
Be interesting to see how it spreads internationally beyond those teams, right? You look at other sports you look at 1992 NBA, the Dream Team, and the U.S. annihilated everybody. And now, 30-something years later, the NBA is like the United Nations.
Yeah.
The best players are not from the U.S.
Yeah. So
baseball is kind of the same way a little bit, and we'll see what happens with football.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so with the Olympics in 2028, they're playing a new style of lacrosse. It's called sixes. 6-on-6, and when a goal is scored, there's not a face-off afterwards. The goalie just picks the ball up and plays it, so it's quicker.
So you got to get down the field real quick.
Yeah, and they shorten the field as well. So it's a way to kind of even the playing field in a way, so that it's not the United States and Canada just dominating, because that was what the Olympic Committee was. They were afraid to just, why have this if it's just going to be these 2 teams playing for the gold every year? And then just spreading lacrosse around the world. I think by this time, I think there's 50-something nations that have international lacrosse team.
It's interesting to reflect on. What kind of lessons, in a little bit, I want to get to your specifics of teaching PE and how you grew into that professionally, but what lessons do you take from athletics, but in particular from lacrosse, that you apply to your life in general?
I would say just some discipline and, understanding that you're not always the leader. There's always going to be someone bigger, badder, faster, better, whatever it may be. But also, if there's a team, I'm not always going to be the leader. Sometimes I may have to be the person doing the hard work on the side or whatever it may be. And just the humility in that, and trying to, the exit of the ego, as you were saying before this. Just being able to take yourself out of certain situations like that and put yourself in certain situations when you're needed. And, just be able to go through a physical battle that's also mentally tough. It allows you to be able to attack certain situations with a calmness.
So teaching PE seems like it was a natural choice for you after you talked to your coach with a Palm Pilot. But it's not without its obstacles, right? It's physical education is not always embraced on school campuses as the most rigorous of academic contents. In my youth, I remember a coach just rolling a half-deflated kickball out there on the field and be like, "Hey, kids, don't kill yourselves." How do you view the role of physical education within the ecosystem of a school and the other content areas?
Well, I'm biased, but I would say it's as important, if not more. It's one of the only things that's taught in a school that directly, positively impacts students' lives, and something that they can continuously use throughout their lives. Whether it's, these different sports we teach them, different techniques, working out in our fitness center. These are all things that they can use later that day, later that week, 10 years down the road. They have that experience, they have that knowledge, or at least they're aware of it. And it's, with some schools, some administrators, some districts, whatever it may be, that kind of, don't put that importance on physical education. It's unfortunate. I, fortunately, have never been at a school like that. Teaching in New Hampshire at the smallest population in the largest demographic, my principals loved that we had PE, loved that we could go outside any time of the year, snow or not. And then coming to San Diego, it was different, but I always had the backing of our principals, always asking what we needed, what could we improve, and just to have that support in, an area of the world or whatever it may be that possibly doesn't do that some places. It's refreshing. It's nice.
How do you combat screens, sedentary lifestyle, video games, all the things that, a lot of the things that didn't exist when you were a little kid? I mean, you might have had Pong or something. Actually, I had Pong. I don't know what you had, but it certainly was not as ubiquitous, right? You weren't carrying around microprocessors in your pockets. How do you combat that in your teaching of PE and make sure that students work towards physical fitness and get their heads out of their screens for 45 minutes or an hour?
Well, we have the luxury here of not allowing cell phones. The only times we really have screens in PE is during our dance unit when they need to use an iPad for their songs or looking up certain dance moves or whatever it may be. But to be able to get into a student's head to the point where they're not in PE and they're doing something physical is, our true goal. And there's plenty of programs and things you can buy where, you have a kid holding an iPad and they're running on the screen. Sure. Like that's going on. And, that may work in a small setting. That may work in an infomercial. It may work at an elementary school level. But with a 13-year-old from an inner city outside in the 85-degree heat with a hoodie on, it's a little bit more difficult. I just try to get them to do whatever they can and to keep motivating them. It's easy to, from a PE teacher's point of view, to look over at a kid who doesn't want to do anything and be like, oh, okay, well, you don't get a grade for today, and just brush it off and move on to some kid who is participating. And that's never been my philosophy. It's never been how I go about things. The kid that is doing something because that's the assignment, that's what I asked, doesn't necessarily need my direct help. The kid sitting off to the side is the one calling out in a way and needs that more direct instruction, that more one-to-one approach, or if there's a group of them. And, my approach has definitely changed. There is definitely a Southern California compared to New England difference in approaching students.
Everything,
yeah. And, it's gotten better. There's you get more personal with them and just kinder and eventually, they start participating and, there's little wins that need to be celebrated.
You've also had a hand in or been the spearhead on organizing after-school athletics at the middle school level, sports leagues and supervising all the coaches, really working in an athletic director role. What's your philosophy of coaching, whether you're doing the direct coaching or you're building up coaches in their repertoire to be able to work with students?
My philosophy for coaching, something that's also drastically changed. It started off as, when I was coaching, as hard-nosed and
Bobby Knight.
Yeah. Not quite.
I remember Bobby Knight making some comment, like his kid was on the team and the kid did something and Bobby Knight said, "Now I know why some animals eat their young." That's an extreme example.
Yeah, no, I didn't. Wasn't throwing any chairs or choking any kids. With coaching, it's a lot like teaching. It's just a higher energy and a higher frequency. there's, you teach kids to have a direct responsibility for what they're doing. And the luxury of coaching team sports is you hold the whole team accountable for an individual's actions. And that will kind of grind people into becoming, more part of a team, falling into the system, and having that approach. And then a lot of coaches' meetings before and after practice. But my overall philosophy is, you're not necessarily coaching and teaching to win. That is, the benefit. But you're really showing these, in my case, young men, how to survive in the real world, how to take responsibility for their actions, how to take criticisms, how to be in a leadership role, how to listen to a peer who's in a leadership role. They're all valuable things that they can go on to working anywhere or doing anything that are going to fall into place. And then in my role here as an athletic coordinator, being able to put any and all of our employees in a position to coach children. I really try to look within our organization to find coaches. It doesn't matter who you are. If you want to coach, I can help you get in the right spot. And then giving them space and grace to grow, but also being there for any of their questions, for their guidance, and, helping them along with, little things. Because, I have, at this point, 13 years of coaching experience compared to someone who maybe has a couple months, but they're still 20 years my elder. I can help them out in these certain situations. And then also being proactive with interactions that's going to happen with families. Putting things in place, putting practices in place, putting policies and documents in place where you can hold people accountable for their actions and what they're doing. So I guess right now, as an athletic coordinator, it's trying and hoping to be proactive.
It's interesting in going to Little League fields or gyms now, a lot of them have signs there that say something along the lines of, you're the parent, your job is to support the kids. We have coaches who coach the kids. Let them do their job, you do your job, kind of thing. And has that been a challenge, making sure that everyone kind of knows their role? Because you always see the bad examples, right, on YouTube, parents just absolutely either berating their own kid, berating some other kid, or berating the refs or the umps.
Mm-hmm. Luckily, from our families, no. I haven't gotten a chance to really see that. There have been some interactions, some incidences. I would say the highest of the worst would be, just a father who knew our soccer coach and was just giving some advice at halftime in a way. And then, you have some family members who want to complain to me about our league's referees, which is something I don't have any control over. And,
it's always the poor refs.
Yeah.
They're making like $14 an hour.
Yeah, and it's their sixth game of the day, and they just came from running some school's PE program all day long. And, they don't see that. They don't understand that. But yeah, there's small situations here and there that I've had to deal with, and even with other schools, parents, and with that again, it's just practicing empathy, giving them an ear, and usually people just talk their way out of it. They just want to be heard. They want to feel like they're saying their piece to the right person, and you give them that, and usually they calm down and they move on. And because in the grand scheme of things here, it's kids playing sports. It's not life or death.
Yeah, and probably the odds of any of them playing into the professional level are slim to none.
Yeah.
Right, despite the dreams of parents and some
Mm-hmm.
kids.
Mm-hmm.
I'd imagine it's been transformative for some students who come from families and family backgrounds where there wasn't a lot of participation in formal athletics, and sometimes they're not even sports fans at home. Like, have you ever run into cases where kids are, I don't know, you're coaching them in something, or one of your coaches is coaching them in volleyball or flag football, and they've never even watched a professional game of that sport?
As the coach or the
Yeah, I mean, as like you're coaching teams of kids who like they're not even fans of the sport outside of school.
Yes, yeah, we definitely have had a lot of kids sign up for basketball, volleyball, in particular, that had no idea how the game really works. You know, scoring rules. Remember when we started our basketball program? I was our girls' basketball coach for the first 3 weeks or so, and so I just turned it into box lacrosse and lacrosse drills with basketballs. And we hustled and we learned to dribble and basic shooting techniques. And we would have little scrimmages, and I would be telling the girls like, "Oh, you have you can't stand on that line, like that you're out of bounds." And like they'd pass to someone who was standing out of bounds, and they're like, "Well, we don't know." And it's eye opening that you sign up for something, you're just like, "Oh yeah, no, I'm going to go and learn on the fly," which is great. But it is something I've never experienced outside of here.
Yeah, I remember as a kid, back in the era when you played every sport, depending on what season it was, right, on the East Coast. And, we were always back then there was only one NBA game a week on TV on Sundays, and we would just watch, and you would record it on VHS so you could see the moves, and then you'd go out in the backyard and just practice them. I think kids are so overexposed to everything now, right? That the last thing they're going to do is watch an athletic event, I think.
Especially with that, like in mindset, like, oh, I'm going to watch this one player and try to replicate that move and get better at that one thing. Whereas they are overexposed and so distracted at times.
At Albert Einstein Academies, we have the IB program is fundamental to everything we do. Talk to us a little bit about how your journey has been in relation to the IB in the context of physical education, because there are probably people who think like, okay, learning these skills or throwing or kicking or running, those are athletic skills. They don't really need a philosophy and a paradigm and a framework around them. How do you view that in the context of the IB?
Coming out to California and getting tossed into the IB, I was a little lost at first because of all the written assessment and just how much of it we were doing. And since then, and through my tenure here, we've kind of refined that. And I've said this multiple times to our coworkers, like if I worked somewhere else, I think I would still use the same principles and cycle with IB, having and making sure kids know and understand certain techniques, skills, right, rules, whatever it may be, having them planning, having them reflect on their plan, and then having them reflect on their performance. Like these are all things everyone should be going through, right, and everyone should be doing in their daily lives and right, jobs, right, whatever it may be. You should be reflecting, you should be planning, you should be setting goals and then creating specific plans to achieve those goals. You should understand, the factual, debatable, and conceptual knowledge of whatever you're doing. So with that, I've bought in. I just would hope in the next couple of years to be more purposeful and more, I guess you could say, literate with IB. We had that from the Gran Canary Islands when they had that exchange. I forget the individual's name who came here. He was just super impressive with how knowledgeable and literate he was with speaking about IB and in his classrooms. It was daunting. But to be able to just access ATL skills or whatever it may be, statements of inquiry and all this stuff, just boom, 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 was impressive. But when in terms of physical education in your daily life, the essentials and the basics of IB are, I think, will make you into a well-rounded human being.
So you said you've been coaching for 13 years, right? You've been teaching kids for over a decade.
Yeah.
Have you seen a change in physical fitness overall in one direction or another?
Yes. So the majority of my time has been here, and I would say that kids are a little bit more, they're less active. They're less maybe motivated, and the interest in physical activity isn't necessarily as high. Although, we have students who don't participate or sometimes don't participate in PE, but then play sports at our school. And I'm just always very confused on that. And, I have a hard time understanding that because of who I am. I would go out of my way to go to PE class in high school. I remember my senior year, I had study halls bookended on my PE class. So on certain days, I would not go to study hall, I would just go to PE for three straight periods.
Right.
And then studied it in college and then played college lacrosse. I love it. But, kids, I've had students who they're like, well, I have a game later today, so I really don't want to play this game. And I was like, it baffles.
Saving it up.
Yeah, saving their energy, because that's a thing. You can do that.
It's an interesting reflection on, societal trends, right? And I know you also can't look at physical activity and athletics in isolation. There's the whole life, the holistic view. Do you talk about nutrition? You talk about sleep? Do you talk about those sorts of things in connection to physical activity and PE?
Yeah, it's more of during our planning time in the fitness center or fitness planning. We usually have these fitness plans and goals before the large breaks, before Thanksgiving, winter, and spring, just so they can practice doing these things as we're leading up to the breaks, and then as they're on their breaks. We also, talk about what you're putting in your body and what you'll see me not eating or eating on campus. I'm not going to be walking around eating a bag of chips. Maybe on the weekend, sure, but I'm not going to walk around the school doing that. And I think that's an important image to give to kids. I'm not going to ask them to do anything I won't do while playing some of the games with them. Yesterday, I ran the Pacers with all of our classes, and I challenged them to beat me.
Right.
It's going to be embarrassing when an old man with a mustache is doing more Pacers than you.
Yeah, he's got more air resistance than you do.
But it would be, I think, a little bit more beneficial if we get into more of like a concrete nutrition class, go into like what these foods really are and what they really do to your body. And, kind of on a side note, I've always joked around about this. Like, I'm interested to see what Takis do to kids' esophaguses and their throats in the next 10 years.
That's
like
right.
If there's, and like the lining of their stomachs. There's kids that eat Takis every day.
Yeah.
And what is that doing to them?
And the whole conversation around serving size, portions, right? Arizona iced tea, you might get 2 or 3 servings in a can. So when you look on there and it says it's still, even one serving has a ridiculously high percentage of your daily allocation of sugar, but multiply that by 3. There's a lot of deceptive practices around labeling too that our kids just fall right into. It's a tricky conversation, the food, the diet, nutrition conversation. I remember when I first started as middle school principal, the campus had a Coke machine on it or whatever. It was run by Coca-Cola, but it had their family of drinks. And so I got rid of it, but replaced it with a healthy, quote unquote, healthier vending machine. And the biggest opponents were staff, because we had staff who that was their thing every day, to go get their sodas, get their chips. So we replaced it with fruit juice, which I know has a lot of sugar, marginally better for you perhaps than Coke, and like chips that were baked chips and kind of off-brand stuff. And we ended up having to get rid of the machine entirely because students were saving their lunch money and buying food from the vending machines as opposed to buying the regular lunch. So it was just interesting to look at like the role of snacks and treats and rewards. I think as humans, we haven't overcome the hunter-gatherer impulse to just, if the tree's full of plums, like 10,000 years ago, you ate all the plums because you didn't know when you were going to find a tree with plums on it again.
Yeah.
And it's hard to get past that, especially overlay that with adolescence and other things. That's a tricky thing.
Yeah, I've had an interesting, I guess, viewpoint with some of the things we offer in schools. And, I joke around with our cafe staff and our admin about this. I personally want to get rid of milk in schools. I know in California they've gotten rid of chocolate milk, and they changed the sugar level that will eventually come into play here. But the milk that's in school now, there's 14 grams of sugar in that little carton. And we used to have our milk machine unlocked during the day, so kids could go get a milk. And we're working out in the fitness center, riding our exercise bikes, and kids like, "Can I go get a milk?" I'm like, "Well, that's gross." You're not gonna like that. No. You're breathing heavy. It's hot in here.
That's how cheese is made.
Yeah. And we're not baby cows. We're not babies either. So I know with all of the FDA requirements and the contracts that are way above my head and pay grade that we can't get rid of it. But maybe one day, as I'm getting older and getting up there, figuring out a way to get water in schools where that's easily accessible, where it seems to be one of the hardest things for kids to have access to. There are water fountains. We did have water bottle fill-up stations, but became issues with them. They leaked, all this, that, and the other. But just if we got rid of milk cartons and replaced them with water cartons.
So I'm going to go on the record saying that if this is a hill that you want to fight for, you have 100% of my support, and whatever that means.
Well, thank you.
I don't know if I have it in my tank in the seventh inning, 2 outs, seventh inning of my career, but the interesting journey around food, even at Albert Einstein Academies, not everybody knows this. We actually used to have a wellness policy driven by some health-conscious parents. This is probably 14, 15 years ago. Health-conscious parents. It wasn't board approved because the board was just kind of emerging at the time, but it was a de facto living document. And it guided, how to celebrate students' birthdays in classes and snacks and what people could bring from home, all of those pieces. And that document has just slid away into, it's a little bit like an Animal House. I don't know if you've seen that movie, but one of the classics of all time, where they're on double secret probation and they don't even know they're on probation. we have a wellness policy that I don't know where it is. I could probably go on my Google Drive and pull it up from 2007.
The first Google Drive.
The first Google Drive. And so it's interesting, right? Is if it doesn't have champions, because that push to focus on healthy food is such a, eating is such a personal experience. So our biggest opponents were actually staff, including some administration, some no longer here, who would say, I wouldn't feed that bleepity bleep to my kids wouldn't eat that. And I'm like, well, they would eat it after a while. If you didn't give them the other stuff, the fast food, they would eventually eat the other stuff. And so, I had that experience the other day. I won't say which campus it was on, but I'm looking in the mail room, and there's pallets of pingüinos, which are like, I'm going to call them Twinkies that are popular in Mexico that are filled with something red. I'm not going to call it fruit because it's just a red colored thing. And kids love them, right? And they're there. And so I was kind of taken aback and I started to ask questions. Oh, well, we're selling those in the student store and they're to help these students or that. I get that. You don't want to have a student-run store where no one buys anything. But it was just a decision that was made without anybody even thinking. Mm-hmm. And like we instinctively know not to sell chocolate cigarettes because we have this very obvious line of thinking to be like, let's not promote smoking. But of equal damage to society, and perhaps going into the future will be a greater damage as people continue, thankfully, to stop smoking, will be obesity.
Yeah.
So I've wrestled with that. I only, again, have so many areas that I can put my focus on, but and that's going to sound like a cop-out on this podcast, but that's kind of a little bit how this goes. But there were years when we had parents who were real activists. They got really active around what's being served in cafeteria. I don't want my kids to have pizza in the morning. And now it seems to have just gone away, particularly after COVID, right? It's there. And every student gets a free lunch in California now, whether their parents qualify for free and reduced lunch or not. So that's another factor in this. And then there's the added pieces, right, of like vendors coming outside of campuses, wheeling little carts and selling things on the street, and then students are lining up there, or they go to the 99-cent store. It's an endless churn of distractions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that'll come in a city setting.
They do, and to try to build those habits. I was raised with organic food, and my mom was, I think I've said this before on the podcast, but if my mom had been born 30 years later, she would have been a billionaire because she basically had Whole Foods in our living room. It was a co-op of organic food. And the neighbors would come and you'd buy into this wholesale, and they'd come and put things in small bags and they would take it. And our living room was the storage place. So I was eating like whole grain bulgur wheat and whole grain bread with almond butter and honey and stuff. All I wanted was a Wonder Bread with that peanut butter and jelly, the swirled one. But now as an adult, when I can eat whatever I want, I don't eat that.
Yeah.
So those habits, that makes up for the fact that I went to the dentist with no Novocaine, the fact that I was able to have good eating habits. I think it sustained me now.
Yeah, and there's also a little bit of that pain situation when you're having your tooth drilled, and you're like, well,
good reminder. Stay away from
I'm gonna brush my teeth three times a day now.
That's right. Yeah. The lunch menu thing is, it's somewhat of a cop out that we all do to say that the law just requires it. Yeah, there are guidelines from the federal government about content of food, et cetera, and protein, but there are innovative places. And I think one of the hopeful prospects in the future is our high school is going to have a full culinary wing to it, with a full-scale instructional kitchen.
That's awesome.
And so that has a lot of possibility for partnering with a third-party vendor, bring in some outside experts, and perhaps start a cottage industry of replacing some of the food that the kids are eating, whether snacks or part of the lunch program, with something we make out of locally sourced ingredients.
That's great.
Yeah, I think it's, once you taste it, if you've ever eaten an egg out of the backyard, which I know you did as a kid, you were probably shocked when you ate an egg like from Denny's or something. Like, this isn't even...
they're different colors and everything.
Yeah. So I know in our conversations, Matt, that you are now kind of segueing into more formal leadership in your job. You are currently a co-coordinator of the ELOP Extended Learning Opportunity Program. Can you explain, what that is and what the process has been like and what you've learned about leadership from your time in that role?
Sure. So the Expanded Learning Opportunities Program is through all California schools that have unduplicated students. An unduplicated student is 3 categories. There's the fostered homeless youth, English language learners, and free and reduced lunch. They call it unduplicated because you can't count a student twice in any of the categories or 3 times. And each school gets funding depending on how many unduplicated students they have enrolled. And that money is for before and after school programs. And it's an extension of the school day, as in it's a continuation of learning, but it's not like math again. It's not English class or Spanish or German class again. It's some other opportunity, some enrichment opportunity for them to do. Each school day has to be a minimum of 9 hours. So if you have a 7-hour school day, you have 2 hours after school, or you can do an hour before, an hour after, however you want to, cut the pie. And with that, with my job, working along with Rebecca Gullins at the elementary school, we've built out some of the program here at the middle school and created our own program at the elementary school. And it's a challenge. It's also been very rewarding. I've gotten a chance to sit in on meetings, have a voice, be a part of certain situations, being, in charge of a huge budget on top of our normal daily activities and normal daily responsibilities. Like I said, though, it's been very rewarding and challenging at the same time. To be able to transition at 3:15 to more of a coordinator role, being in charge of certain things, being able to answer questions, being able to make decisions, being able to collaborate with other people. It's been fun, and it's definitely something that I think accelerated my interest in administration more. And it's like I said, it's been fun but challenging. I go all day long of dealing with and teaching and having fun with middle schoolers to then handling adults, and it's quite the change in some ways, and in some ways it's not.
I'm not touching that one. I know what you mean. I've often commented that the ELOP coordinator or similar roles are really like being a principal of a school. You're dealing with all the same elements. You've got students, you've got other adults, you've got parents, you've got budgets, you've got shifting conditions, you've got to deal with social media, what people say and don't say about you. You have all the elements, so it's a really good proving ground for administration / leadership. And I know you're getting ready to go into a credentialing program. I think this will really serve you, hopefully, really well in that.
Yeah, I agree. And with the compliments and criticisms, that we get, it's nice to not have my face and my voice in any of our social medias. So
wait till that my tens of thousands of fans know.
Yeah, I'll just won't follow back. I don't read any of that stuff, and I don't see any of it. Honestly, I'm not even aware of it.
You still on MySpace?
I'm sure it's out there somewhere. But yeah, it's definitely a whole new avenue. Dealing with parents one-on-one about issues or compliments they have about the program, questions they have about how to get in, who's allowed in, being able to present to the board. I thought that was going to be one of the biggest challenges before I did it, and then afterwards was, I had just built up this psyche in my head, and it was super easy. They were very receptive and nice individuals, and I don't know what I was thinking it was
Right.
going to be. But yeah, it's a huge learning experience.
It's and it's going to continue, right? Because the ELOP monies are around for the foreseeable future, and it's one of those interesting cases where a politician, in this case Newsom, Governor Newsom, and the legislature gets behind something and puts billions of dollars into it over multiple years, and I think, I'm assuming best intentions, it could really transform communities, but the boots on the ground implementation of it, it's one thing when the legislators are cutting this deal in November before the session closes. It's a whole different deal, right? What it looks like on the ground.
Absolutely. You can throw money at a problem, but it's still there. You got to find ways to actually solve that problem. Or you can throw money at a situation, and you still got to be able to handle it and figure it out. We had kids who didn't feel like they belonged to school or didn't feel like they had a home at school, and maybe their test scores were low after COVID, and this is a way to have kids stay longer in school, to have kids have ownership of what they're doing after school, more of a sense of belonging, a sense of pride. And I think that's what we really try to offer, between both campuses is it's not just like an after-school program. We want, these kids to have a say in what they're doing and how they're doing it. And, there are these guidelines we need to follow. And, I would hope that all schools in California are following them. They're nicely written guidelines that, could result in a very positive impact with, schools of any nature.
The only bad thing about it is the acronym. I've heard so many people call it ELOPE.
Oh,
and
yeah.
I'm like, let's not give
the ELOPE.
ELOPE.
Yeah,
not give kids that idea.
No, we're the only school that I've heard call it ELOP.
ELOP,
and I don't like any of the others.
No, none of them are good. But yeah, what would the 30-something-year-old Matt tell his 18-year-old self who didn't yet know, or at least knew that he wanted to be a PE teacher but hadn't gone to college? And what lessons has half a life taught you about leadership, about the world?
It's interesting. Our long-term sub had asked us this yesterday, but he had phrased it in a little bit more of a funnier question. I'll answer that part after. I'll answer yours first. I would say the 18-year-old me who didn't decide to go to college and went down some other path, that, all those difficult decisions that, you were faced with and you're going to be faced with, go the harder route. When you're afraid of something, it's because there's something there to be achieved. Mm-hmm. And there's, some things throughout my childhood and young adolescence that I didn't do because, I might have been afraid, might have been, insecure. And, when I decided to kind of take those leaps of faith, when I decided to kind of go ahead and attack the situation or even just attempt the situation, things ended up working out. So I just tell myself to, go towards the more difficult stuff. It's going to pay off in the end.
Yeah, I'm not sure who said it, but saying that, hard now, easy life later, easy now, hard life later.
Yeah.
And it's that JFK quote about, we didn't go to the moon because it was easy. We went because it was hard. Mm-hmm. So it's that process. It's probably some parallels to what you see in lacrosse too, right? Very demanding sport, like, both endurance, speed, strength, mm-hmm. everything, right? And it's like, got to keep going.
Yeah.
You give up the first time you get smacked with a stick, that's not a great recipe for life.
Yeah, when the ball moves around and the defense rotates and it's your time to dodge and you just pass the ball up, you haven't taken the opportunity and you've allowed the other team to reset into a defense. If any of you followed that.
Yeah. I didn't, but
yeah.
As you peer into the future, Where do you see yourself in 10 years in relation to school leadership? Doesn't mean you got to be leading a school, but educational leadership. So right now you're starting a credential program in the next couple months, and you've got this ELOP experience, the coaching, the athletic coordination. Where would you like to be in 10 years with all that?
Oh, man. 10 years. 45. I would like to still have my hair. I would like to be
I won't take that personally.
I would say an assistant principal at least by that point, and in a spot where, becoming a principal is within sight. This isn't something I want to rush, but it's also not something I want to set long-term, far-away goals to.
Right.
I want to kind of keep my vision narrowed. Right now it's just do well in the credentialing program. See how that goes. See how the experiences I have with practicums, shadowing, things like that, where, I've seen what it's like here. That's the only real place I've really experienced in Southern California.
Right.
So if I get to see what it's like at a 3,000 person high school,
right.
I went to college with 1,000 people. I have no idea.
You went to high school with like 300.
Yeah. So I don't know what 3,000 kids in a building feels like. I don't know what those vibrations feel like. But yeah, I would say at least to a vice principal. And, I'm a fairly loyal human being. I wouldn't say like blindly loyal, and I wouldn't say, dumbly loyal or stupidly loyal. But, there's something to say about, building something somewhere and going up through that ladder.
Yeah.
The grass is always greener, as they say, but, when you leave and you turn out, it was just spray painted and that's dirt.
There's a very vulgar comment about the grass being greener I heard the other day, and I'll try to do it in keeping with it. The grass is always greener where it's watered with bull doo-doo.
Keeping it PG.
Keep it. Yeah, anyway. But
Yeah.
But to your point, right?
Yeah, and like anyone can leave, and it takes certain types of people and, to stay and to build and to have ownership and thrive in a certain area. Yeah. Not necessarily talking about myself, but there's other people that we work with who have been here a very long time and have done amazing things with building this organization. And there's people that have come in around the same time I have and have stayed. And there's a sense of ownership and a sense of community behind that. And when we all have the same mindset of making student-based and student-first decisions, we can start to go in the correct direction or go in a direction where we can build. Yeah,
that's there's something to be said for endurance and longevity in a culture that has people think a year or two in one job is too long and they got to go somewhere else.
Yeah, I haven't done anything when I moved out here, I worked at the Global Visions Academy.
Right. Yeah.
But I had asked them to give me a contract for the following school year because I had just moved here. And they're like, we don't do that for anyone. We'll give you an interview at the end of the school year and we'll decide then. But you can interview other places. Yeah. The very next day I interviewed here.
Okay.
And Barb had me sign a letter saying my intent to work here. Yeah. And then at the end of that school year, they offered me a position and I told them where I was going, and they were pleased. They were happy that, I'd come out here to kind of get them out of a bind, and, they knew you really well, and, I had a great time there and having a great time here.
You've been very generous with your time, and I just have a couple more questions, but what's with the mustache? I mean, not that I'm criticizing your mustache. I'm actually fairly envious of the ability to grow facial hair. But you are committed to advocacy every November. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so I'm a part of Movember. I've done this since, I want to say, my junior year in college. It's a charity that every November you grow a mustache. and it's a conversation starter to get people to talk about this charity, which is all about men's mental health awareness, prostate cancer, testicular cancer. And in my family in particular, there's been, colon cancer, prostate cancer, mental health issues, and, the stigma that is followed around with mental health issues with men,
Yep.
Being able to talk about that. And I've gone through some pretty heavy ups and downs in my life, which, were evened out through therapy and things.
Yeah.
And, a lot of men of any age aren't really taught or shown how to talk about their feelings, emotions, or whatever it may be. And I wasn't either.
Yeah.
And I was no saint and had a lot of misconceptions, had a lot of philosophies that weren't true. And, it took a while for me to kind of really understand those things. I worked at a camp for mentally and physically disabled adults, and that kind of evened out my thinking about life and different experiences in college. And a lot of just reading and being able to go out and find growth in that changed that. Mm-hmm. But like I said, there's a lot of people don't go through that. Some people they're not shown that way, or they aren't interested, or they don't know that it's there. And so that's really why I got involved in it. And, I don't know how many billions of dollars they've raised for these certain causes. But it's fun to grow a mustache. It gives me an excuse to have one for
I wouldn't know.
a month, a year. And since being out here, I've at the end of each November, I give our students 4 options, and they vote on those options, and that's what I'll do to my mustache for a week. And the first year, I had to bleach it and dye it pink, and it was embarrassing enough. The only pink dye at this, I don't even know what makeup store or beauty store this was, that I was lost walking around in, was fetish pink. And so I had to dye my mustache this bright neon pink. And since then, we've done zebra stripe. I did a really impressive rainbow, and by I mean my fiance dyes them for me. I couldn't do this. I'd say so. Zebra, rainbow. I shaved half off once. Last year we did Christmas colors. So it was red, green. That was, it's right around the holidays, so people kind of love that. I bleached it once, and I kept it for an extra week over a vacation because we were in Vegas coaching a lacrosse tournament. That was a pretty big hit. But the year I had to shave half of it off it's something I'm never going to do it again. There was one night, and I purposely waited until the evening to go grocery shopping.
Yeah.
And I was walking into Vons, and they have security guards at grocery stores in California, apparently. And this woman, she's a security guard, fell on the ground laughing at me. And I've never felt so just the heat on my skin. I was walking in there, and it was tough.
So that's the half tough. Mustache is not on the option.
No, that will never, ever be on the option. And I'll ask kids for suggestions every year, and they'll be like, well, shave half off and then shave the other eyebrow. I'm like, my eyebrow's not going to grow back like my mustache is. It might not grow back.
It might not grow back.
Yeah. So this year we don't have them all nailed down yet, but a lot of the options have been from kids, or the suggestions from kids have been purples and greens, right. A lot of rainbow. I had a suggestion of doing Einstein colors, yellow in the middle and then red and blue.
Pretty cool.
Yellow's a hard thing to dye.
Yeah.
So I'll have to hit Hulk Hogan up on Instagram and wonder how he got his facial hair that color.
Well, I think all humor aside, it's commendable that you focus on male issues, and as you say, especially when we're not conditioned to even talk about them, mental health or health otherwise, that tends to get pretty sensitive pretty quickly, right? Depending on what type of disease, et cetera, we're talking about. I'm going to link in the show notes to the charity, so we'll make sure that folks can find that. I have one last question for you. So you have the privilege of creating a billboard for the 5 freeway. Cars are going to go by at 65, 70 miles an hour. Drivers only have a second or 2 or 3 to read this thing. What does Matt's billboard say that expresses your view on life or your career or anything that's important to you that you think people should know as we wrap up today's podcast?
A billboard that expresses something that
you would like people to know, whether either know about you or that you think society would benefit from thinking about.
you're cared about or you're loved. Something simple that doesn't need to be long, but I'm just trying to think like,
that's great.
Middle of the night, someone's driving on the highway.
Had a tough day or...
Yeah, just zoning out and just look up. Yeah.
That's a great place to wrap for today, and it ties into your previous talk about supporting charity and also your work with students. It's been a real privilege, Matt, to have you on, and I appreciate you sharing from one East Coaster to another. I appreciate sharing as we sit out here on the West Coast, and our fellow people on the East Coast are freezing right now, and we're not. But it's been a great time, and thank you for coming on. We'll have to do this again soon.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to the Superintendent's Hangout. You can follow me on Twitter at DVS1970. Please be sure to share this show with friends and family on social media and in the real world. Thank you to Brad Bacayal for editing and production assistance, and to Tina Royster for scheduling and logistics. Thanks for hanging out, and have a great day.